Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. You're watching the weekly Spinner Rack. I'm your host, Chris. We're going to have a really good show tonight. I'm starting about almost a full 2 minutes late, so my apologies to everybody. And my apologies to my guest, who I'm about to bring out. I've got a guest to start the show off this week. I was trying desperately to set up a new camera, and I'm just having the hardest time. This is so unprofessional of me, I know. I thought that it was going to balance on top of my monitor. And I'm just like, this is like, I wish I could have honestly shown you guys because it was so silly. I'm going like, just like fiddling with it and dropping it and stuff. And I just go, fine, I'll get it next week. I'll get a little stand. I'm using my regular camera right now. Let me tell you about our guest today. This is interesting. It's interesting because this is an artist who has definitely worked in comics for, let me add it all up. Wow, breaking into 4 decades, technically. 4 different decades he's done professional work in comics, if I'm doing the math right. Might be, 80s, 90s, 10s, 20? 5 decades. My math was wrong. And he's got an upcoming Kickstarter that I wanted to plug, but he's got a unique career. I think that this is going to be an interesting interview to talk to somebody who's done stuff both in comics and with other projects. I'm excited to get a chance to talk with him. If everybody could please be kind and welcome Mr. Guy Dorian Sr. Guy, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today.
Hey, thanks, Chris, for having me on. I love your show. I watch you religiously. I follow you. I only follow a certain amount of people that
That's
I
kind
actually watch on YouTube. The rest is all garbage rhetoric that shows up in my feed, but and little clips. But yours is one I always try to catch religiously, and
got several people in the chat that are recognizing you, by the way, Guy. So that's nice.
They didn't even.
Yeah, a couple people saying that they recognize you. I just wanted to point that out. So that's really nice of the audience to say that. And I appreciate that you apparently came from the slight future of Halloween 2024. We've got. I like your setup actually quite a bit, though. That's pretty nice. Is this your studio that you're talking to us from?
This is part of my studio. My studio is a 32 by 15 area. Then I have another studio that's a 10 by 12 area, and then I have a little alternate space as well. So it's good size studio. But I do so many different types of jobs. To tell you about my werewolf buddy here, tell you about these guys is my wife and I put on, like, I guess the largest animatronics Halloween in our entire development.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So they're all down here every year with me.
Oh my goodness, got it.
Yeah, and I'm a huge horror fan. My wife and I have been watching horror ever since we met each other, and I've been watching it since before, and her as well. And we're talking about the mid 80s. So
sure,
it
was a good era. There were a lot of new and revised properties. Man, the 80s was awesome. But I grew up sort of throughout the 80s, so I've got like a nostalgic love for so many 80s properties. It's kind of that carries a little weight too. I want to talk about all the different types of art you do and everything. But I'd also really like to start, I'll go roughly chronologically, with just understanding a little bit more about what the comics industry was kind of like when you were breaking in. Because you were telling me just before the show that you'd broken in even earlier than I realized. I know this is a lot of preamble for a question, but it was like I'd seen some of your early credits on. I was reading stuff like at the time, New Warriors, Marvel Comics Presents, stuff in like that mid '90s era.
Yeah.
But you were just telling me that you actually were working on comics even before that, right?
Yeah. Before that, from like 1988 or 89. I think it was 88. Excuse me, I'm just getting over con crud.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was 88 or 89. My brother had known a guy who had met a guy who knew a guy who had just started working at Marvel. He used to and was working on like stuff like Zelda and things like that. And
okay.
yeah, and he was set to take over as Rob Liefeld was leaving and Jim was leaving and all those, as Image was just starting to form, but the guys were still finalizing books and sending in books. But actually, I believe I started even before that. I guess 88 might have been before that.
Because Image was like basically late 91.
Right. So scratch that, reverse. Let's go before that. I became his assistant, and I was working on all different projects, and it's so long ago. I can't remember in order or anything like that. I just remember that I was I did some assistant work on the breakout comic for what's his name again? I said it before, for Alpha Flight.
Was it Mark Pacella?
Yeah, it was Mark Pacella. I was assisting with him and hanging out with Dan Penosian and guys like that. I think Arthur, Art. How am I forgetting his name now?
I'm bad at names too. Everyone that watches this show knows that I blank on names all the time. So don't worry too much about that.
Anyway, so I started assisting him, and I was hanging out with him at first, getting to know the ropes, and I couldn't believe I was sitting there with real Marvel artists. It was like, oh my gosh, I was a young kid, but I have ADHD and I don't know I don't think about anything that's happening. I just do it. And so I was there, and I had no idea the things that I was putting my pencil on were going to be T-Bear. Yeah, T-Bear, I believe. I'm not sure that's how you say it, T-Bear.
I think so. So.
Thanks, guys. Anyway, so I was there, and I was for like 2.5 years a fly on the wall at Marvel. John Romita be walking by, and everyone. I bumped into John Buscema, talked to him.
Wow.
Just everyone.
So you did get to go to like the bullpen there in New York.
Let me talk about that real quick. So 387 Park Ave South.
Yeah.
The 10th floor, maybe, I think. I was there all the time. And I saw every artist when they came in. Steve Ditko was still bringing in work. Herbie was still
that's
working.
right.
Yep. And all the editors and Tom DeFalco. And then I remember when Bob took over and all that stuff. I was there for all that. And it was an incredible time because they literally still had the tables for the bullpen, and they opened the door and they were like giving me free stuff, free paper, and this was even before I became a professional. But during that time, I was hired. I was paid for. I was given a 4-page or a 5-page Daredevil story that I was paid $50 a page for. I knew it would probably never see the day of light, but I was actually a paid artist at Marvel I think I was 20 at the time, 19 or 20 at Marvel on my own stuff. But I was still assisting throughout that entire time. And it was just an incredible time because it was like,
that is cool.
Well, it was like,
you were there at a transitional period though. Like that Marvel was like, they had no choice but to sort of, bring up a lot of new talent fast when their big names all were about to leave. And there was like an emphasis on style. Was that any sort of directive you were given at the time?
No, I wasn't, but I was given a little bit of a directive after. So remember, I was there before that stuff happened.
Right.
So I was hanging out at the Marvel offices. Everything was hunky-dory. I would see Fabian Nicieza all the time because Mark worked with Fabian. And then eventually, I'll speed this up. Eventually, I was working on X-Force and X-Factor and stuff, but first on X-Force. And like the first appearance, what was it, X-Force 11 or something? Where Deadpool and Domino fight each other and stuff like that. I was assisting on that. I remember I was drawing like monitor pictures of Banshee, I think it was, and knives and Deadpool's blades and stuff like that. It was really a wild thing. But I really, even as a comic book guy, I didn't know what I was working on. I never considered that, because I was hired for that. They bought a Fantastic Four double page splash from me. They bought Nova pinup from me. I did a Daredevil pinup with Dan Penosian that never saw the light of day. But I was being paid at Marvel, and they even established a page rate for $150 a page, which was a low rate back then, which is unfortunately not that high anymore. Not that low.
No, it's like that's what's scary, is that like page rates have barely moved at all.
After all the years I've been in, my page rates are just fine. But the fact that there's a lot of people out there today, and most people never will work at Marvel. Most people will never get to work with a lot of the people that I even get to work with, which I hope they do. But it's just a fact, because when you consider the entirety of all independents, Kickstarter, this, that, there's only a fraction of people that actually work at Marvel and DC with a full career that lasts more than 5 years, or they get to work with those people. And luckily for me, the time I came in, I got to work with all the greats, and
awesome.
Still today, I still work with them. Right now, I'm working with Larry Hama, Walter Simonson, Louise Simonson, Sal Buscema, Scott Hanna, and I'm missing a few, but I get to work with all of them.
That's so nice. I want to show something to my audience as like a visual aid here, because it'll like seg into what we'll talk about is so you started getting like credits in the 90s on things like this story for Turbo. And so there we are in like the mid 90s, and then we jump forward to like more like 2011, and you started doing a lot of stuff with IDW, especially on ROM.
Yes.
Help us fill in the blanks, though. There's not tons of comic book credits in between. Right. Tell us a little bit about the other stuff you've been doing. Like help us bridge the gap here.
Okay, so what happened was after that stuff, what I did was while I was at Marvel, ROM. ROM. I know everyone knows me for ROM because I've gotten so much fan mail about it in my messenger and everything. People, I don't want to say it, but people are saying I'm the ROM guy of this era, especially because my pal on all that was my buddy Sal Buscema. So it doesn't get any better. But everyone seemed to love my take on ROM because I had the best teacher, which was Sal Buscema. Either way, in between all that, and how it became that way is I wanted to work in toys, and I'm sitting there, and I keep walking by this office, and it says Toy Biz on it, and right. So I go and knock on the door jamb of a guy named John Romita, and he goes, "Hey, Guy, what's up?" I already knew him at the time. I said, "Hey, John, what is it?" Because I was poor as anything. I didn't have time to buy toys or money to buy toys. I didn't even know what was going on, what company was what. I just was doing the best I could to get whatever work I could whenever I could. And he said,
"You're an artist hustling."
Yeah, he says, "You know what? Do you want to go over there?" I said, "Yeah, I want to see who they are. Is that a toy company? Because I want to work for toy companies. Can you introduce me?" He goes, "Of course." He puts his hand on my shoulder, and with John Romita Sr.'s hand on my shoulder, a knock at the door, it opens up. He says, "This guy is really great. He's a really great artist. You guys should take a look at his stuff." And they looked at my stuff and went, "Well, we do all types of art. The stuff is asset art. So it'll go for toy boxes, probably. It'll go for T-shirts. It'll go for animation studios and such." So he said, "What we're doing right now is some Silver Surfer, and there's a Silver Surfer cartoon being made. Why don't you do some character designs for the Silver Surfer?" And they let me draw and ink character designs for the Silver Surfer, and the toy company jobs came in, and I made 3 times the amount of money working on that stuff. And I had to do about I didn't care how much work it was. If it was as much as comics, it didn't matter. But literally, I could draw that stuff while I'm driving in the car going to McDonald's. So, as a guy who had a baby at home and a wife and rent, and an artist who was just a 20-something, I think I was about 24 at that time, 23 maybe. I got in. And then,
there's tons of big names that have like gotten into that side of doing, like you're saying, like asset and licensed art for companies. I mean, it wasn't too long ago I made an episode about Mike Zeck, who a lot of us like remember for tons of big comics, but he, sort of did the tail end of his career doing, a decade or so of licensed and asset art. So, I mean, I know it's steady work for a big company. That's awesome that you're still getting any favorite toys you came across in your career?
Yes,
working in the toy industry.
I did 2 things that after that, I won't tell the whole story of how I got into Just Toys Company, but it was right by Marvel. And there's a whole story behind that. I'll say one day, because they didn't want to hire me at first because I was a Marvel artist. And I was like, let me try. You don't have to pay me. And if I do as good as anyone else here or better, you just pay me a little bit less than the guys you were hiring, and I'll work for you. They did. And you know what? I got hired and I worked there for years, and I got to work. I did all kinds of stuff, but there were 2 properties I worked on there that I really, really enjoyed. Yeah. One was I got to work with the WWF and Vince McMahon and his company. Okay. So I designed a line of wrestler figures. They wanted them flat, and I wanted to make them like action figures. And that uses a lot more rubber. Also, you have to figure out how are these muscly things going to be able to move that look like statues. So what I did was I cut under the arm, and I said, how much rubber do I actually need around the wire? So then there's these cuts and all this stuff, and all of a sudden I designed the whole line of the WWF, now WWE, greatest wrestlers of all time from bendable figures called the Bendums.
I totally remember those. You'd see them in like every Target and Walmart.
They were everywhere. They were in Canada, they were in America, they were in England, I believe, and everywhere. I had no idea how the reach that it was having. Even today, Matt Cardona, who owns, what is it called? Major Bendy's, with Mechanic and a few guys, they just actually had me finalize a toy that one of the figures that never got to be finalized.
Macho Man.
Macho left. He was one of the first guys I designed, and he left just before it was going to come out. So they said, so they said, we want to use your design from that and finalize that one today, because their whole line is basically, I don't want to say copied, I would say heavily influenced by my designs. So
that's really interesting. Wow. So you never know when some of this stuff will come back.
And then here you go. That's a trading card. Let's see if the camera catches up. Guy Dorian Sr. I fulfilled the actual trading card I was drawing back then.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. To like work something that you said that you were like really a fan of, like toys and stuff. That's really cool.
Here's the thing. Matt grew up with them as a child. I'm 55 now. So it was crazy. I had no idea anyone even knew my stuff. Yes, I am a huge wrestling fan. I grew up with wrestling. But I was,
that's cool.
I had no idea what I was doing, not what I was doing, but what I was working on. I wasn't just drawing them. I was designing them from scratch. That line, when that toy company started having trouble, the only line of toys that kept them going for several years was that line of toys. They were so popular that it kept them going. Not Star Wars, not any of the other stuff, not Power Rangers, the wrestler stuff kept them going. And then I left to go work at another company and work for other companies. But before I did that, cream always rises to the top. There you go, Dr. Showbill.
Yes.
I knowing that I worked at Marvel, another guy from Image came over and was like looking for someone to design Youngblood's action figures, the Bendables. I was already the popular guy doing the muscly characters and all that. And you know what? They didn't really do a lot of that stuff before I came on board. But once they had that asset, like I had told them, the sky's the limit. So I designed a Youngblood action figure, bendable figure.
Oh my
that
goodness!
Came, and it was in all the stores, and it came with a different cover for each character, drawn by Rob Liefeld. With inside the comic was Rob's. So it was, I was just always working with like Fabian, and Fabian wrote the first story I ever drew. The Warriors. So
yeah, the New Warriors stuff that you did.
Yeah,
I remember that was a crossover at the time. It was like New Warriors, Night Thrasher, and one other comic that was connected to it at the time for like a 6-issue storyline. I think they did.
You got me. I can't remember, but
I just sort of remember that though, like because I was really into that at that era. That's so cool. You got to work with like people that came before you, people that were like your contemporaries.
Yeah.
And still obviously working today. And I was hoping to like move to this cool crowdfunded thing.
Sure.
Let me pull this up. So, because we've talked about this on the news a couple times here. I'm a big fan of Larry Hama. I'm just, so like I follow anything he does. And that's how I came across this. Mounties versus Werewolves. You guys have a Kickstarter that's about to launch. I've got the link there, folks, if you want to get notified on launch day. What can you tell me about how you got involved in this project? Because this is definitely very, very different than anything I was expecting.
All right, let me tell you, but briefly, let me just fill in the little gap there.
Okay.
About comics, real briefly. Give me 1 minute, and then I'll go into.
I'll allow it. Sustained.
Okay, so here's what happens. After that, I decided to go back into comics, started working with Sal Buscema, Bob Wyacek, and all these guys. I worked with Mike Royer and everything with a company called PKMM. And they were putting out comics. I was an editor, I was a character creator, a world builder, and they hired people like Bill Sienkiewicz and everybody, all our friends. Joe Weems and everybody was there. I mean, just everybody. My brother Ian was a phenomenal illustrator. If you ever get to see his work, Ian Dorian, he is phenomenal. He just worked on the Watchmen animation film.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes, as a character designer. He's brilliant.
Right on.
Yeah. Did I say he's brilliant? Oh my gosh. Anyway, gotta scratch that reverse. Anyway, so what happened was, then I worked at that company, and then I worked with IDW on ROM and other stuff, and then I worked at Storm King with John Carpenter, and this is why it's important. Yeah. I worked with John Carpenter and Sandy Carpenter at their company Storm King. With Louise Simonson, we did a few horror stories in Tales for a Halloween Night. I worked with Bill Sienkiewicz. He inked me on Tales for a Halloween Night, another story, and one with Sal Buscema, and then Weezy and I created an entire new series for 5 issues. Kelly Jones did a cover, Howard Chaykin did a cover, Walter Simonson did a cover, P-Poy, myself, and Sal, and we did a full 5-issue run, and then it became a trade paperback. But that horror stuff really was the first horror I got into. And then, but during PKMM, Larry was hired to come on for a book named Core, Controlled Organic Robotics. My son was writing as a professional writer. Larry came in and wrote and laid out the rest of the story. So if you want to get a hold of a guy named Matthew Pilata on Facebook, he'll hook you up with the book if you want it. It's a huge graphic novel. It has my buddy Herb Trimpe's last final cover that I was inking when he passed away. It has a Michael Golden double page splash. I think it's a double page splash that no one's ever seen unless you bought that book. And the reason why a lot of people didn't see it is pandemic. And then we couldn't go for like 2 years to anything right when it came out. It was like, anyway, now that's the minute. Now we move on forward to me working with Larry on Mounties vs. Werewolves. And Larry and I produce books. I make projects happen. That's one of the things I do. So I've done this, and I've worked with Hollywood for the last 5 years on projects and series that will be coming out and such like that. And I have my own company called Good Alien.
Got it. Now Larry, it's coming together for me.
Larry after us working in the past, I would talk to him, and we're really good pals. I said, Larry, is there something you want to do? Because everybody seems to always do what I want to do. And like with my toy company, I have a toy company called Bamco Toys Inc. And we have a whole Kickstarter running right now on that. And it's like toy figures and all that. And it's a really cool, only has a couple of days. But anyway, Larry says to me, well, I got this thing, Guy, that's like 10 years in the working. The Bamco Toys was Lost Landers, by the way. It's a pick. It's a Kickstarter pick, so it should be on the main page. But Larry says to me, Larry says, you know what, Guy? I got this thing, Mounties vs. Werewolves, and I'm like, oh my gosh, horror! This is it. And werewolves, I draw werewolves really well, so let's do this. And so then Larry sent me over the work, and I was like, oh man, this whole Canadian thing. I always fall into friends of mine that are from Canada. Some of my best friends are from Canada, and I love Canadian television and all that. And, you know, it was like, oh, wow. So what Larry's thought process here is, I worked with John and Sandy Carpenter on horror stuff for years, right? Yeah. I'm a horror guy. And I'm a known professional in and out of the industry and around toys, games. My stuff is produced on toys, Marvel toys that are at Five Below right now. They're in all the stores. If you go to Disney World, you'll see my artwork all over the walls in the superhero store. You'll see my artwork on T-shirts and everything. You won't even know it. A guy came to me at a convention, and he asked me to sign something that he had, and I said, "Do you want me to sign your hat, your belt, and your shoes too?" He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because that's all my artwork." and because they don't put your name on that stuff. Anyway,
I get it.
But Larry knows that I have all these contacts with everything, so he became part of Good Alien. And so our first project together through Good Alien, which he is a part of, is Mounties vs. Werewolves, which he's going to do. Yeah. He had it in his vault for 10 years. And his thought process, when I work with Larry sends me all this reference, and he's doing the same thing he did with G.I. Joe, only this time he owns it.
Yeah.
I'll be obviously part owner, but it's his ownership. And he is sending me all this stuff. And whatever he did on G.I. Joe, creative characters, expanding the universe, the weapons, the knives, the guns, this takes place just after World War I in the 1920s in the Canadian Alps.
What a cool era, yeah. Taking away some of the modern contrivances like cell phones and stuff that could make things easier for the heroes.
You've got it. And so imagine this sort of, it even has espionage and everything like that in it. But remember, these werewolves also have human forms.
Of course.
So they walk amongst us. Do you know? Who knows? Well, only the secret group of Mounties knows.
That's good.
And now, who are these Mounties? And now, if anyone knows the Hammer films,
I know them well. I reviewed some of them on my silly little podcast on this.
That's right. Yes. So Larry's thought process in there is, hey, Guy, because at first I draw handsome people, just like Romita could not draw a non-handsome Peter Parker. It just
that's true.
Happen.
Peter got a glow up when it went from Ditko to Romita.
Right. Yeah, I talked to Ditko about that in his studio once. I'll explain that someday.
We'll have to have you back for some of these behind the scenes stories.
Yeah. So I think I was the last known professional from Marvel who ever got to be in his studio hanging out with him for like 35, 45 minutes. Wow. And it was on Jack Kirby's birthday. I just had left doing me and Jack's son, Neil, and his granddaughter were guests together because they asked me to be a guest with them on for like one of the largest podcasts in New York comics. But anyway, so now my son is the editor. He was been a writer with film and television for a long time and worked with PKMM. He spent 12 years before I said, you can call yourself a professional now. But we worked really hard on getting this together. We've got some of the greatest comic book creators like Kelly Jones doing a cover.
Oh, good.
Yep. J.K. Woodward for his known for his Star Trek paintings and many other things. Mark Spears, who's been doing Spawn and Marvel and DC. Kevin Conrad inking me, who worked on Kiss Psycho Circus, and myself and Sal and Larry doing layouts, and I'm doing all the finished art, and then Kevin Conrad. I mean, just an array. Thanks, man. Yeah,
I'm serious. Like, that's why I wanted to have you on. You know, like you've hit oil.
I don't do things. Drilling. I don't do things in a small way, Chris.
I can see that a little bit.
And if Larry's there, if it's Larry's thing, and it's my thing, it has to be as good as it can be. So this cover is the one that I did, and yes. Kevin Conrad inked. So the thing about this is what I did is I tried to create the entire basic idea of the story. And why I say the Hammer films is, what's his name? The actor again. I can't remember who played in all those films, had gaunt look all the time. Why am I forgetting?
Oh, you're talking about Peter Cushing?
Yeah, Peter Cushing. So at first I had him with my Ramita faces, debonair and strong hero, and Larry's like, cool guy, but we need that Peter Cushing, that Hammer. And so we're gonna get real horror style Hammer, and then you mix that with, imagine mixing that with G.I. Joe, the greatest and only G.I. Joe phenom, and the man that is G.I. Joe.
Sure.
And anyone who loves G.I. Joe, if you're out there and you love G.I. Joe, which these guys are coming up to me now and giving me all kinds of trinkets when I go to the cons, and patches. I did a G.I. Joe cover that had gold foil and everything like that, an anniversary issue. But Larry's going to put all that G.I. Joe in there.
I know, yeah.
Into these characters.
No, he's good at like blending big premises, but with like, grounded, like he knows military stuff. He knows, like that whole side of that was a big part of his life. So I'm excited to see what he brings for Mounties. He's done government spies and stuff with like S.H.I.E.L.D. and G.I. Joe.
This has all that stuff in it.
I love it. I love it, Guy. So obviously this is launching pretty soon. Anything else we should keep our eyes out for upcoming projects from yourself?
Well, let's see here. I'll just say the launch date is, I'm reading now so I don't mess up. Launch date is August 15th at 9 a.m.
3 days.
You can sign up for pre-launch right now. Go there now. There's already like 350, 212,
almost
327. Okay. And once it launches, let's see here.
I encourage everybody watching, like, whether you're backing it or not, like if you're giving it some thought, follow it. And that way you can like sort of see what happens with the campaign.
And share it. Share it if you would. Larry would really like if you could share it as well.
Yeah. I mean, and you've got to figure this is like good timing because Larry's G.I. Joe just was the most funded comic book Kickstarter ever, and it shows that people definitely have a lot of love and affection for not just the property but for Larry too. And I'm hoping that there's a portion of people like myself that will like follow this. And I definitely wish you both super success on it. I love werewolves. People that watch this show know I've been talking forever. Like I've got a werewolf story in my back pocket that I want to tell one day. So. This just looks fun.
If you ever want to and you want to put together a comic, I know a few people.
Okay.
Just let me know. Hit me up. I don't care. I like to do projects with anyone as long as we can make really good stuff. I don't care. But anyway, I would like to say one thing. There is a project. If I could just give a little shout out to my Bamco Toys Inc. If you go to if you're at Kickstarter. We only have till the 15th. The 15th is when that one ends, and it's called Lost Landers. And it's
Lost Landers.
It's a pick. It should be on the main page. It's a Kickstarter pick, and it is a comic book that you can also get statues for.
Found it. Okay, hold on.
Yep.
This?
Yeah, that's it. So we're trying to get to at least 10 grand before
Sure.
it ends in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Hopefully more, but whatever we can get to. And it's the beginning of a brand new comic and toy series that you might have saw in the 80s, but you missed it. And it's come out, but now you see the Kirby influence to the left.
Oh yeah.
And all this stuff. I got my wrestler to the right in the red jacket. And as you scroll down, you can see some of the different villains.
Look at these designs.
Thanks, man. That's one of the things I am as a character designer and toy designer. There's
I like that guy.
You know who wrote that story?
No.
Walter Simonson.
Oh, he's the best. He's just awesome.
As you scroll down, there's some of the characters, and this is a page that Walter wrote that I drew. And as you go down, you'll see some of the exclusives, the trading cards and the comic covers, and it's like a heroes cover, and then a villains cover, and that's
fun.
Yeah, it's a fun series. It's a fun series, Chris, and it's for kids. It's just heroes and villains. That's it. Just like if you went on TV. And you watch He-Man or you watch G.I. Joe or you watched Herculoids or you watch any of that stuff, it's that kind of thing. So I appreciate you letting me talk about this. But
happy to do it. That's really cool. So you've unlocked the first goal here, but if in the next 3 days we get some like a late boost, there are some more statues of your heroes and villains that people can unlock.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll throw that out.
And they're all at the cheapest price you could possibly get right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's what you get sometimes when you can cut out a middleman, Go straight to the readers and such.
I'll just real quick, I'll show a figure.
Oh, look at that. Here, let me zoom in on this a little bit.
I believe that he is unlocked. So
that's amazing.
Thanks, man. I am a toy lover. Oh, you can see the Marvel poster behind me. That you could get. Some of my artwork is on there. Mine and my brother's.
Oh, okay.
We did the Chitauri, and my buddy Paul Galassi, he did Bullseye. He's right underneath me, so we were happy because I called Paul up, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, we're together." Anyway,
that's great.
So this is Dunks. I remember I showed this to Arthur Adams, and he immediately said, "Oh wow, that's awesome, man! I love it." I got pictures with Arthur with him. Thanks. This is all based on my designs.
I love it. I love it. Guy, you gave us a lot more time than I told you I was going to take from you today.
I'm sorry.
I'm grateful, though. I would love to keep talking, so I will talk to you personally, like offline, and we'll have to have you back, like closer to when all this stuff maybe is getting fulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really appreciate your time. Larry says thank you as nice. Well, because it's he told me to say thanks, and he thanks every one of you. For anything that you do, any sharing of Manny's vs. Werewolves, anything at all, likes, shares, join the campaign. Oh my gosh, do we have the coolest stuff for that campaign? I'm not going to give away special dinners and private one-on-one. There is so much cool stuff that's in that. It's just like once in a lifetime stuff. Very cool, dude. I follow. Thank you for the
Yeah, just highlighting some comments real quick, rapid fire. But it seems like people got something out of this. So thank you, Guy, for sharing with us. I appreciate it. I wish you every success with these crowdfunded campaigns. Okay.
Well, again, before I leave, thank you so much for doing what you do. I love your show, and I don't want you to ever stop because I get so much great information. And half the time you're talking about half of my friends on there, and I love your take on stuff. You're welcome, Doctor. And yes, thanks, Chris. I think he said Chris. Anyway, thanks. I appreciate all of you. And you
thank you, Guy.
Oh, Chris, care. That's the Chris. Yeah.
All right. Take care. I hope that was fun for everybody. It seems like you guys had some really nice things to say. I appreciate the interaction with both you in the chat and Guy. What an interesting guy to meet. He probably gets that all the time. That's awful. I apologize. I didn't know that we would end up like learning so much, but I didn't want to interrupt once he started sharing with us. So, just somebody that's seen a few different eras of professional artists and work with them. And I think that this upcoming Mounties versus Werewolves looks like fun. We'll see. Thank you. That's nice. That's really cool. The action figures did look cool. I agree. Tell you what, there's a bunch of shows still to go. And this was a good week, though, for me to start with an interview because there wasn't tons of comic book news. But that's what we'll do next. And then after that, I do have some thoughts on some of like the latest comics that came out this week. There's some really good stuff. So let me add the news document here. And that's what we'll do next. I'm going to pop out my earbud because I don't need it anymore. Thank you. Yes. And as you can see, I've slimmed down a little since I took the photo for the thumbnail there. You know, I really bulked up for a little bit. I just, like really did a bunch of push-ups and pull-ups and, got swole for a minute. But now I've slimmed back down to my normal weight, my normal fighting weight. I was just having fun with that. All right. So let's talk about DSTLRY first, because they raised $5 million in seed funding to go towards securing all sorts of stuff, content deals. They want to adapt some of their stuff into other mediums, but control as much as possible and expand their digital footprint. Obviously, DSTLRY has a unique model where they sell their comics, in the store. I've seen if I had one handy. I guess I don't. But they sell in the store, but they also sell digital copies. So, they want to grow. That means that they have in total, they've now raised about $7.5 million. That's a really good chunk of change for such a new company. It'll be interesting to see how they actually implement these ideas. But that's nothing small. So where does this come from? Some of the investors include the French publisher Delcourt, Kodansha USA, specifically the U.S. branch of the Japanese manga publisher, Lorenzo de Bonaventura. Now, that guy's got an eye for what's going to be big because he's produced movies like Transformers, G.I. Joe, a bunch of different comic book movies, Red, Constantine, a couple others that are based on comics. I think he also did Jupiter's Legacy at Netflix, but we won't hold that against him necessarily. He was the guy that was, he saw the potential of Harry Potter when only a couple books had come out and bought the rights for that. So, certainly an eye for what's going to be big. And then a bunch of different sort of investment capital firms. But anyway, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. They need to sell a lot of comics to pay back all $7.5 million. Yes. Exactly. For working out. Yeah. Buffing up. 100 push-ups every day. Well, that's the kind of cool thing is that this money, unlike Colin Kaepernick's, what was it? Luna or Lima or Luma, whatever it was called. Instead of investing in AI infrastructure, this is actually going to the comic book creators and actually producing comic books. Yeah. What was the action figure Kickstarter's name? That was, oh geez, hold on. I just closed it. I don't know. Somebody else is going to have to help or jump back in time. I'll put chapters in later. Land... something else. I can't remember. I'm bad at names. But the figure was nice and beefy. Lost Landers. Thanks, Ryan. Shin Matthias, that was Lost Landers that was mentioned at the end. Two separate words. Lost Landers. Yep. Ultramega. I don't know how many of you guys read this book when the first 4 issues came out, but Ultramega was a pretty badass comic created by James Harren, and it's going to continue. So specifically, James Harren's Kaiju comic Ultramega is returning September 18th with an issue 5. And the cool thing is there will be a bunch of variant covers. This isn't James Harren, although James Harren's art is badass. Big fan of him. Big fan. We've got Mike Mignola for issue 5. We've got Matthias Bergara for issue 6. Gabriel Hernandez Walta, issue 7. And Luis La Rosa for issue 8. Those are some great, super talented artists. And what's kind of cool is I wouldn't say any of them really draw in a similar style to James Harren. So you get sort of a different take on the material. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, exactly. Ultramega is really, really cool. It's different, which is nice. There's a little more to that. If you don't know what it is, Skybound publishes this, and here's sort of their summary in part. When Kaiju invaded Earth, 3 humans were granted the power of Ultramega to save humanity. They failed. Now, a new Ultramega, Noah, has risen in the brutal world without heroes or hope. But the Kaiju Queen isn't the only challenge he must face. Deep in the stars they gather, psychotic, cold, a world of Ultramega. So it's a little bit Kaiju stuff, it's a little bit Ultraman stuff, but it's also through a very uniquely American perspective. You know what I mean? Maybe you don't unless you've read it, but it's really good. I do recommend it. So I'm excited. I think variant covers these days are just big part of the industry and get a lot of hype, and it's just a good marketing tool now. It's just a good marketing tool. Let's see. I told James Harren I'm working on an Ultraman type story too. He gave a lot of encouragement. Well, that's nice to hear that he's so nice. Ultramega is fantastic. Hey, and there we go with E.J. Sue, a guy who has drawn and will continue to draw some Ultraman comic stuff. So that's a pretty good endorsement in my book. Nice. Yeah. I will say no more. You can get it as a trade paperback at this point. So it's pretty easy to jump on, see if it's your thing. I dug it a lot. I dug it in a very similar way to how excited I got for Daniel Warren Johnson. We'll see exactly how prolific James Harren will continue to be, but I think he's got a similar energy and a similar way of writing characters that have some real humanity that you can connect to. There's something nice beyond just the excitement of the action and the scale and scope. Great point. Yeah, it's a bit of a post-apocalyptic story too. I'm going to talk about some comics from Argentina for a moment. Argentina. So, Netflix Argentina had an event this past week. They announced 19 different original TV show projects, maybe movies. I didn't look at them all, but that they're making there in Argentina. And I can only hope that some of these get a translation and get released Netflix worldwide. But if not, that's why we can use, what is it, like when you switch where you say your internet is from? A VPN, virtual private network. That's why we've got VPNs. So, oh, very nice. Yep. Some people recognize this stuff already. Argentina has a great history with comics. They're going to, first of all, have an animated adaptation of the iconic comic strip Mafalda by Kino, and that comes from an Oscar-winning director, Juan Jose Campanella. So that's encouraging. He won Best Foreign Picture, I think the year before last. And they're also making a live-action adaptation of El Eternata, or The Eternat, and that's based on the graphic novel by Hector Osterheld and Francisco Solano Lopez. I've done an episode about it. I think that that's a fantastic sci-fi story, a story about humanity, just like weathering the odds. Something that was very influenced by the political climate at the time in Argentina, but also just works as a badass survivor story. Just incredible. I know it's so good. As long as you stick to the story, it should work very well. No plans to do anything with Cyber 6 right now. Too bad. Yeah. Oh yeah, Mafalda's been huge forever, and she's had an animated series, but I think it's time for a new one. Yes, Alberto Breccia did illustrate another sort of like reboot idea based on the same idea, but it all goes back to the beginning. Yeah, it's a great book, published in English through Fantagraphics. I thought that they still had copies available on their website. It's really, really good. It's really amazing. Yeah, in my episode about the book, I talk about some of that behind the scenes stuff, which is just wild. You could certainly make an argument. It looks great. It moves at a great pace. It's got memorable characters. It's got fantastic sci-fi ideas that become like a little surreal by the end, but that's really cool. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Eternaut 1969. 69. Sorry, everybody. Oh, it is out of print. Darn. Yes, libraries. Exactly. Libraries are our friends. Anyway, just wanted to mention it. I will hope that we get an English translation, like subtitle version. But if not, I'll be using a VPN and just doing that. This just brought me back. This is some nostalgia bait in a way. But Atari has announced a comic book coming out in November to promote their Yars Rising game, which is a prequel to their 1982 release, Yars Revenge. I know I'm older than a bunch of people here, so I know not everybody remembers it, but Yars Revenge was a surprisingly popular video game, okay? It was really, really popular. The video game is going to come from developer WayForward, and that comes to consoles and PC in September. The original video game was the highest grossing original game for the Atari 2600. So not one that like debuted on another console or like a licensed sort of game. But yeah, Yars Revenge was very, very popular for the... Oh, nice. Good. I'm glad that there's at least one person that knows what I'm talking about there. Yeah. Yeah, well, there was always a little bit of a story to some of the Atari games because you couldn't really represent the story too well in such simple pixelated form. So a lot of times the manual that would give you, like all you had was one button and a joystick. So sometimes the manual that came with it would come with story pages. So there was a little bit of a story, just to be clear. Atari is still around as like a software developer. Mm-hmm. Yep. Atari. The comic is just going to be a single issue, and it's a prequel to the game in which professional hacker Emi Kimura and her friends must deal with a job gone wrong. 32 pages. It comes from the WayForward game director, Adam Tierney, and it's got art by, and I have to admit, I don't know these people, but we've got Elle Bruni, Ashley Hetrick, and Aurora Mano. So, yeah. Oh, have they just licensed their name? I guess I thought that they were still around. So they've just licensed their name and stuff like that. Oh. Oh, that's cool to hear. Mafalda is getting an English translation? Right on. WayForward is a fantastic developer. Oh, okay. I'm not the biggest video game expert, so that's news to me. That's really cool to hear. Someone needs to make a Zero Wing comic with all the bad dubs. Got it. let's talk about Tom Brevoort and his opinions on the last X-Men run, because obviously we've got the From the Ashes run now, but there was the Krakoa era. So editor, and the reason we're talking about this is because Tom Brevoort is now the group editor of all the X-Men titles, but he posted on his Substack what he thought went a little wrong with the Krakoa era. And it wasn't like any damnation against anybody in particular, but it sort of shows what he might be trying to do differently with this X-Men run. So he was asked about whether the X-Men will continue to be morally gray as they often were in the Krakoa era. This page shows Kitty Pryde phasing somebody's gun into his own head. That's pretty brutal. So here's part of Tom Brevoort's reply. I don't think that the X-Men should be casual or gleeful killers. While they have certainly been in situations where lethal force was called for and appropriate over the years, I don't think that this should be their default setting. And one of my big complaints about the end of the Orcus War was in how readily and even joyfully some of the X-Men murdered their foes. And he talks about how there's like a scene where Nightcrawler teleported one of his enemies into space for him to just die in space. And I was like, yeah, that is kind of dark. And I don't know that Kitty Pryde, I don't know, this shouldn't be necessary with Kitty Pryde's powers. You know what I mean? They were very angry at Orcus, and I get that, but it's pretty dark. Brevoort also wrote that while the goal of the Krakoa era was said to have an X book for everyone, and it may have started that way, he feels that by the end of the run, they were all a bit too similar. So what he's trying to do with, like the new X-Men run, some of these X books that we've been looking at in the past couple of weeks, is to sort of try to differentiate them and have them each have a different, goal as to what kind of a story they're telling and what audience they're aimed at, which also means that ideally we're not going to have nothing but crossovers where you have to keep up with everything. Nightcrawler has been and continues to be a devout Catholic, so it was a little strange to see him do that. It didn't feel completely in character. So, yeah, I think that you can have them kill, but they were sort of like doing it pretty casually with their powers that shouldn't have been necessarily. You think he just missed? He's just bad at teleporting now? Anyway. I agree, but I think that they're just sort of moving forward. Oops, didn't put in the transitions here. So, Paramount this week sold off a couple of its websites, including ComicBook.com. Now, that's not going anywhere, but the owner sold it off this week. So, Comic Book and Pop Culture, those are the two websites. They sold them to a company called Savage Ventures. That's a digital media company run by Sam Savage. And that's interesting to note because Sam Savage was the CEO of the company that was behind comicbook.com for many years, and they sold it to, I say they sold it to Paramount in 2018. Technically, they sold it to CBS Interactive, which is all under the same umbrella, and it moved over to Paramount at a certain point. Basically, Paramount is just looking to cut costs. Their goal is to cut $500 million in operating costs. So they're selling off some of their assets that cost more than what they can make. That just aren't worth it to them, I guess. But anyway, the full deal, they didn't reveal the full deal. That's private. But they did share that there weren't any layoffs. So anybody that was working at comicbook.com or popculture.com apparently got offered a position with the new company if they wanted it. So we'll see. It's a little funny that it basically Sam Savage sold it and then got it back. He bought it back. I don't know what the change is, but I'm okay with a new perspective on it. There have been some good articles on comicbook.com, but they're not the first place I go to for my comic book news. In fact, that would be an interesting thing to talk about for a moment. Do you guys check out comic book news anywhere regularly? I mean, obviously a bunch of you come here, but I look at CBR sometimes, Bleeding Cool, AIPT is a big one these days. Not much else that I can think of. Oh yeah, The Beat. The Beat. They can be very samey. Samey. Yeah, sold it and bought it back, yeah. Yeah, that guy Chris is okay. Reddit, I didn't think about that, but sure, that's a good compilation of things, yeah. I'm sure there's other people. Twitter, yeah. I get that. I did not bring enough snacks for everybody, but I needed something to keep going. Oh yeah, Newsarama. I guess sometimes I look on Games Radar, but not a lot. Thank you. Too much noise out there. YouTube is better. I try to look at comic news, but most sites make it almost impossible to get past the clickbait. That is the one trick. I agree. A lot of these sites have started just sort of, they have a catchy headline, and sometimes it's just stuff they think you want to know about, but it ends up just being a list or something. I don't know. Oh, previews. That's interesting. Okay. Not much left to Newsarama. I haven't been to Newsarama in a long time now that I think of it. But I used to for a while, yeah. It all goes through phases. But it's like, what's the editorial vision that differentiates it? I'd say that The Beat goes a little more classy, and Bleeding Cool goes a little bit more with like sort of the behind-the-scenes type of news. ICV2, that's another one, and they focus a little bit more on the business side of things. Yeah. I got more news. Like this. That's the news. No, well, there's more to it. The popular space western podcast Midst is getting a comic, and that comes from writer Colin Lorimer and artist Alejandro Aragon. Dark Horse publishing it. They're getting into that sort of niche of adapting things from other media. It's an interesting little niche that Dark Horse is carving out. So it's going to be a 3-issue series. Issue 1 is 56 pages, pretty big. The press release sort of gives us the premise for the comic. When their ramshackle postal ship crashes on a mysterious new landmass, siblings Rowan and Ogden have to make the best of it. Adventurous Ogden convinces reluctant Rowan to make a fresh start in the strange new islet that sits between the bright Un and the dark Fold. I've never listened to this, but I guess the podcast has been around for a hot minute. It's been around since 2020 by an anonymous trio of artists that call themselves Third Person. Interesting. I guess I put this here because I think I might check this out, even though I haven't listened to the podcast. The premise sounded interesting. Sounded like a little more developed than the next thing. The idea that, like, these guys are some sort of postal service and they crash land somewhere. I was like, okay, I'm a little curious. Unfold. It's almost like it's two parts of one thing. Yeah, it's a radio drama of sorts. Yeah, exactly right. And it's like, I read up on it a little because I was posting the news and I didn't want to be a total dunce about it. But it's like they've got a story, but I think a lot of the dialogue as characters gets improvised a bit. Kind of like something like Curb Your Enthusiasm, if you've ever seen something like that. It goes in seasons, and they tell like a story over the season. But then, like, the characters are sort of like, yeah, some of the dialogue is improvised. Yeah. You know, I wonder if Night Vale already has gotten a comic, because that seems like they'd have to have, right? I don't know. Because every big podcast gets a comic that's in that world. I think Critical Role has had a comic, and My Brother and Me, I think, has had a comic. Huh. Well, this is sort of more of a spin-off from what I read. As in, like, it takes place in that world, but it's got some new characters, I think. This has been a popular comic, Sweet Paprika. It's getting some more. So, Mirka Andolfo. She's got a comic, Sweet Paprika, and it's getting a spin-off comic by Steve Orlando. He's been writing tons of big mainstream comics. And an artist I have to admit I don't know much about, Emilio Pilou. Andolfo's series started back in 2021. It's basically an erotic office comedy. So it's got angels and demons, and they work at Infernum Press. Adventure Zone, yeah. That's what I was thinking. Not My Brother and Me, but Adventure Zone had a comic, yeah. Trash Movie Bonanza should get a comic. Geez, why didn't we think of that? Oh my goodness. Who knows? If we can get enough views, maybe it will justify itself. That's an interesting idea. So, this is the spinoff, Sweet Paprika, open for business. It's going to be a 5-issue queer romance comic that spins out of the short story The Prince and the Queen that got published in 2023's Sweet Paprika Black, White, and Pink, #1. In that tale, shy and unfulfilled office worker Aubrey hooked up with handsome Persica. In the new series, the two have sparked an ongoing relationship, but it's one that's about to be thrown into a whole lot of turmoil. I think that sometimes there are some comic genres that get looked down, like teen comedy stuff like Archie, or erotic comics like, I don't know, Cherry Pop Tart or Omaha the Cat Dancer, and people sort of look down at them. But I think that it's all in the execution, and that these are legitimate genres that deserve to be explored. So I'm all for the fact that Sweet Paprika sells well and does well. I think that that's cool. I think that the more genres there are in comics, the more comics themselves get destigmatized. If everybody reads different types of comics, but they appreciate comics, I think that's a good thing. So for me, it's all about just well-executed stories. Yeah, you think you might like it? I'd try it. You know, Paprika is something I thought that I knew until you just said that. Everything tastes better with paprika, and it occurs to me, I don't know it well enough to pull a memory of like exactly what paprika gives as a flavor. I'll have to have some soon. Oh, you haven't heard of it? It does pretty well. An Image comic. Yeah. Mirka Andolfo is definitely making a name for herself. I think Sweet Paprika, and she's doing stuff, I think, with DSTLRY. Yeah, you'll see Mirka Andolfo's name a lot more in the coming years. Sweet Paprika and Unnatural are both good. Got it. Oh, that's good to know. Paprika does taste like paprika. Got it. The characters are really nice and cutesy, and there are soft romantic beats in these stories. It's not all carnal. And I think that's what I mean by erotic doesn't have to mean pornographic. You know what I mean? It can like just lean towards one thing more than another. The DC and Marvel omnibuses. Will we ever get them, folks? Will we? Well, they've been delayed again. This time to October. They were originally scheduled for basically this past week, August 6th, my birthday. They were delayed to September, and now they're delayed again to October. There's no word on why these are being delayed, but they are delayed again. By the way, if this is the kind of thing you're interested in for these books, just keep in mind that there's only plans to print them once. There's no plans for additional printings. And a lot of that is because DC and Marvel don't collaborate a lot these days. It's kind of amazing that they're even doing this. Between the two, I'm more interested in just DC versus Marvel because it collects some great stories like Batman versus Hulk that you're just not going to easily find. But Amalgam was a lot of fun, but it was also a little hit and miss for me in terms of quality. But it was a fun idea. It's just that it was also, like it took the premise of we're jumping in the middle of these existing characters, but you only get one issue of them, Spider-Boy and Super Soldier and things like that. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't even considered that one, that it could be due to demand. I was assuming it was just sort of the difficulty of coordinating getting material from two different companies, but maybe that is something more, maybe it is just demand because they don't want to do the reprints and everything. So maybe as they learn what level of interest there is, maybe that's what's pushing it out. They're like, okay, we need to do a little bit more. I mean, if this thing sells like gangbusters, you can believe that could inspire talks for reprinting things like that. But I don't know. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in collaborating on something new because, a lot of these stories were done more in like the 80s and into the 90s. Marvel at the time wasn't owned by a humongous conglomerate. They were owned by a bigger company, but they weren't as big. And DC did, of course, eventually get, bought by Warner Brothers, but for a long time they weren't. The 70s and 80s, it was easier to collaborate if they wanted to, because they were a little bit more independent. And now they're sort of a subsidiary of something bigger. JLA Avengers is absolutely fantastic and one of the best things they've done. But for my money, the absolute best crossover was Teen Titans and X-Men. I think that ultimately that is the best crossover of any of this stuff. But that's my opinion. Maybe I'll do an episode sometime just sort of doing a tier list or something easy like that. Yeah, just keeps getting not humongous delays. We're not talking like delayed 3 months at a time, but it is getting pushed back and back and back. Let's talk about some of the Marvel MCU news that came out. So if you don't know, every once in a while, there's these big Disney events, D23 conventions, and that Disney, of course, has a lot of stuff talking about Disney itself, the theme parks, the movies, but they talk also about these days other things that they own. There might be some Star Wars stuff. There's going to be some Pixar stuff. There's going to be, in this case, some Marvel stuff. Yes, Teen Titans X-Men by Chris Claremont and Walt Simonson is in this reprint. So, at D23, we got some news. And the reason I'm mentioning it as news is because it didn't get shared publicly with all of us. This was stuff that only the people at the event got to see unless you're watching a bootleg somewhere. But they showed a new trailer for Captain America Brave New World that had more Red Hulk footage. Seemed like the response to that was actually good. They shared a video of the Fantastic Four cast. They're filming now. And it did show Johnny Storm in at least a costume. I don't know if that's the costume, but it's a costume. They shared footage from Ironheart. That's going to be hitting Disney Plus pretty soon. This is the one I'd want to see the most. They premiered a trailer for Daredevil Born Again. And interestingly, it showed that they're going to use the villain Muse. And Muse was a new villain character that was created by writer Charles Soule and artist Ron Garney. a psychopathic artist is the best way I can think to describe it. Muse was like a serial killer, essentially, but he was super strong, and he would like make art out of people's bodies. He was really, really scary, to be honest. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see how they use that. Oh, you saw a leaked trailer? Wow. I don't know why they wouldn't release that. It seemed like that was like the most complete trailer that they released. I hope it's good. Technically, this would be the 5th live-action Fantastic Four movie, because the first one through Roger Corman wasn't actually released, but they did make one. Then they had 2 with Chris Evans as Johnny Storm, and then they did the Fan 4-stick movie by Josh Trank that absolutely bombed. I didn't see that, but that's cool. I did an Indiana Jones ride in the California one and in the Tokyo one, and they were both different, but they were both really, really good. They had some animation news. One thing I'm putting out there is that What If Season 3 is going to be the final season. Fine. I don't think that ever fully lived up to its potential. I enjoyed it for what it was, but I think that they could have done more with it. They said that it'll have a Moon Knight story. They said that Marvel Zombies was going to be rated TVMA, so that's more intense than I think anything else they've done in the animation. There was also a rumor that X-Men 97 will be, the X-Men will wear the costumes from the Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely run. We'll see if that's true. This was the craziest thing to me out of all of this. There was a clip from Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and that does not take place in the MCU continuity, but it is an animated version of Spider-Man in high school. And it reveals that Peter gets his spider bite when Doctor Strange and Venom come through a portal fighting along with a spider. How could you make Spider-Man's origin a lot more impenetrable so that the average person doesn't understand what the hell's going on? Well, they nailed it. They nailed it. You might be right. That's an interesting point. For What If, yeah, it was cool that they got so many cast members to reprise their roles, but maybe if they just didn't even bother with that, they just got voice actors. So, just cut out the stunt casting and just tell any kind of a story that you want as compared to who's available and for how long. I hope that's a rumor too. I don't know what to say. Seems like that's not going over well with you guys. I got like a little distracted by everybody going what? Yeah. Anyway, I hope it's not too long until they share the Daredevil Born Again trailer, because I love Daredevil. At first, when they called it Daredevil Born Again, I really thought that meant that they were going to do the Daredevil Born Again story again, which they already did in the Netflix version. It's like, do we really need the same actors redoing that story several years later? But it doesn't seem like they are redoing that story, to be clear. It seems like they're moving forward and telling stories based on other comics. Spider-Man has one of the great origins in comics. Let's screw it up. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Good luck with organizing the Comic Book Community Awards this year. I know that the nomination period has ended, so good luck organizing it. But yes, if people hit like, that helps. There was some drams at San Diego Comic-Con. We've already talked about some of it, but TMZ actually released a report of some of the stuff that the police had to get involved with. One person was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. 5 people got citations, and there were 12 other incidents that triggered ongoing criminal investigations. So there could be some more arrests falling out of this convention. Some of the crimes related to the convention, they also included things like minor theft and burglary. Probably always going to get one or two of those at a big event. Light vandalism. They didn't have more details on that. I don't know what light vandalism would be. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Inadvertently cracking a window? And driving over the double lines. So probably somebody was drunk driving, one would assume. One would assume that is what that means. Did they crash Grinder? I don't think so. That tends to happen more at the RNC. Woo, jokes. Light vandalism is drawing on stuff with a marker. Yeah, somebody was actually signing their signature, and it went off onto the table, and the San Diego Comic-Con said, Jim Lee, no drawing on the tables. You're out of here. Light Vandal is a low-tier villain name, yes. Vandal Savage has an illegitimate son that he calls Light Vandal. I don't know, maybe. I was going to say, like, would spitting gum be considered light vandalism, but that would probably just be, like, littering or something. I don't know. One guy was charged with use of biological weapons, but the charges were dropped when the authorities realized he just stank. All right, thought that was real, realized halfway through. Jokes. Tagging the toilets in marker pens. Maybe that is something like, writing a phone number in the bathroom stall or something like that. Lightly scribbling on the table, drawing a really cool Spider-Man would be light vandalism. This is the last piece of news I have, and this was one that just drove me nuts. So, Larry Hama, you guys know I love him. He posted this to social media. It made me a little sad. He said that he feels he is being systematically erased from Marvel's history with lots of little slights where he just doesn't get credited properly. Specifically, this top image is the credits for Deadpool and Wolverine. And they've got things like Deadpool created by Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza, Wolverine created by Len Wein, John Romita Sr., Herb Trimpe, and Roy Thomas, separate issue. And then they've got with special thanks to, and it's alphabetical. They've got Chuck Austin all the way through Christopher Yost. Okay, no mention of Larry Hama. Well, Larry wrote Wolverine for 7 years, and that included this issue, 88. That was the very first meeting in Marvel of Wolverine and Deadpool, and they fought. You would think that the first fight between Wolverine and Deadpool would be enough to get somebody a mention in the special thanks section. I would think that is all I'm saying, but no. So I started trying to figure out, and this is just me speculating at this point. I know, guys, I'm going to explain how that happens. I'm going to explain what I think is happening. Just to be clear, Larry did not invent the Patch character, though. Patch was Sal Buscema and might have been Claremont. Might have been Chris Claremont. So I looked at all these credits, these names, and I think what they did was they said, okay, which characters did we put in the movie? Who was the writer and artist that first drew them? So I think that there's some sort of character in there that would have been created by Chuck Austin in his X-Men run. So probably somebody in the background. I don't know who, but I think that would have been that. Or a specific costume. Like if they're designing, sometimes a character gets a new costume. So I think what they did was they looked at any specific character or costume, and that's how they came up with this. But if that is what they did, that ignores a lot of longtime writers and artists that just didn't get a piece of that specifically added to the movie, but they certainly helped build the characterization. Azazel, that's it. Yep, I knew that it was one of them. Right. Chuck Austin wrote Azazel the first time. Claremont on John Buscema. I said Sal, didn't I? I was thinking about earlier. Yep. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the correction. I do. Yep, it was Azazel. I thought that I love Larry's run on Wolverine. Like I say, 7 years, and it's great. One of the artists he worked on for a long time there was Mark Silvestri. Silvestri's in there, but then again, if you've seen the movie, there's an iconic shot based on a cover that Mark Silvestri did. So I think that's how they came up with that. Yeah, exactly. But it's like they put Stan Lee in here, and I don't know, like, I guess just because they're talking about X-Men in general, and technically Stan was the writer on that. But, they mentioned Daniel Way. He wrote Deadpool for a long time. He wrote a lot of good Deadpool. I just think it's really rude and unfortunate that Larry didn't get credited. No matter what, if we just say, okay, the characterization he gave Wolverine and stuff, we're going to just set all of that aside. For simply writing the first time that Deadpool and Wolverine met and fought each other, that's important. Yes, everybody, you did hear one of my cats. So I didn't see this mentioned on any comic book news sites this week. I was disappointed. I posted it to social media because I think that that's an injustice. But I don't know what else to say or do. I just think Larry deserved credit in this particular instance, and I think that there needs to be some more thought put into how they credit these people. But that's everything I had for news. Like I say, not a ton of news this week. By the way, let me just show you one thing real quick. I'm going to show you. I've got this new camera, but I can't get it aimed properly. So now you've got two of me. This one over here that I'm pointing at, it's darker, but it always focuses on me, whereas this one does that weird autofocus adjust thing. This one always will have me, and I just can't. I need to get like a special tripod for it, but I'm going to be using that camera next week. So I can always light myself better with whatever I need to, but that's what, yeah. I'm seeing Devil, 4 Chris's. Okay, hold on. Just because I've never done it before, the quad salute. Let me add another differenter camera so that we can look at the comics that came out this week. Because I think that'll be fun. I've got some stuff to say. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. Bet you didn't know that I would be singing. Just putting this in focus. Bear with me. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Extra camera. Here we go. I'm going to turn on another light. So, I have not been too wowed by the new X-Men run yet. None of it was outright bad. Well, let's see. We talked about Just Plain X-Men by Jed MacKay and Ryan Stegman, and I was like, it's fine. It's fine. We talked about Phoenix, a little hard to relate to with the space adventure stuff, very cosmic. NYX, I was like, I'll give another issue for that. NYX so far was like the one I liked the most, and then there was one other last week that I can't even remember what it was. I can't even remember. That's not good. Now we get Uncanny X-Men. Written by Gail Simone, art by David Marquez. Folks, I really like this. This felt like such a classic return to form for X-Men in that it balances some action with some subplots and some interpersonal drama with the characters themselves. It doesn't hurt that maybe I should turn off this light actually. There was too much glare. Okay. The art by David Marquez is really strong, which is nice. We get to see the characters work together as a team in sort of a unique action sequence, but mostly we get them sort of talking to each other about what is their mission now? Like, what is their goal? They don't have Charles Xavier. They don't have Krakoa. They don't have the mansion. A lot has been taken away from them. And Rogue feels very strongly that she wants to continue Charles's dream. It's mostly Rogue, Gambit, and Wolverine on an adventure against a dragon. I'll tell you something. Gail really does a great job giving these characters each a voice and a unique sort of motivation. The flirtation between husband and wife now, Rogue and Gambit, is strong and believable without being sort of fake or annoying. And I really loved Gambit in this issue specifically. He uses his thief skills and his quick wit to bargain with the dragon. It's great. It's really good. Gambit comes out great. I love this. I don't know. It's not the biggest action you've ever seen. It's not like some new enemy debuts and has a unique origin. It's just good, solid storytelling that's paced well. It's really... The characters are likable and believable, and they each have a driving force that means so much. This is some of David Marquez's best, in my opinion. So specifically, it motivated me to draw this week. I don't know how many people tuned into a live stream I did, but I decided I liked it so much, I just decided to draw my own take on Rogue and Gambit, and that's what I came up with. I just felt like drawing them after reading the comic. And I haven't been, excited enough to just be like, oh, I love this so much. I've just got to draw. But this comic did that for me. That's pretty cool, in my opinion. When a comic inspires you not just to feel the emotions of a story, but feel them so strongly that you have to go out and do something to share it with the world. I'll give another example. I love David Bowie, okay? And when David Bowie passed away, it really surprised and hurt me. And the way I got through that was basically, in retrospect, it was some art therapy. I painted a picture of David Bowie, and it was through shattered glass or a shattered mirror, and it had some of his different eras and costumes and stuff through the different panes of the broken mirror. But that was just how I sort of could latch on to the emotions I was feeling and go from there. And yeah, I liked this comic so much, I just felt like I had to get something down. That's nice of you to say some nice things. Thank you very much. I don't think that the letters page prints fan art, but I did post it to Twitter and Gail saw it, which was kind of her to notice. Oh, you did? Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm excited to read this. There's also some subplots, like I say, that have a villain taking over the mansion, and they're going to use it to jail mutants. It's such a mean-spirited perversion of Xavier's dream. This was a house for children to learn, and the lady taking over is I want you to like she works for the government. Somehow they got authorization. She's like, round up everything, sell off anything that is worth something, and we're going to add those to our assets, burn everything else. I want this turned into a jail within like a week. So they've got tons of money. It's hurtful to think of the mansion, such an iconic location, being turned into something so dark. It's such a simple idea, but it's very effective. So this was great. This was really, really good, and I recommend it. I haven't been keeping up with everything X-Men, but I didn't need to really know anything before this. Anything that's relevant was relayed through some simple exposition. And yeah, it looks like Rogue is going to be taking leadership of a team of X-Men, and their goal is to continue Xavier's dream of peace between mutants and humanity. That's what it seems like so far. Whereas, for instance, this X-Men, Scott Summers has taken a bunch of people and is living a little bit more of a Krakoan existence of like having mutants live up in Anchorage, Alaska. They're experimenting with, like how to grow plants better and how to use technology in different ways to benefit all of humanity. But they're more isolated in a way, And this is more classic superhero stuff. And the balance was right. That's the last thing I'll say, is that the balance was right between action, melodrama with the characters, and some subplots of stuff that's going to happen. You like this one more? I think that's what you're saying. I guess you could say that the X-Men have really gone rogue. I hope I delivered your line okay. Psylocke has been two characters for a long time now, technically. Quanon and Betsy Braddock. So, for a long time. What else is worth discussing this week? I'll talk a little bit about DC's latest event, Absolute Power. Event stuff isn't for everybody, but when you've got Mark Waid and Dan Mora working on it, works pretty well. I'll say that. I like this. I like this a lot. Dan Mora is one of the best artists DC has right now. And the premise is fun. It puts the superheroes as underdogs by having the villains have taken away their powers. Okay? So anybody that has escaped getting arrested, and by the way, it's Amanda Waller, Suicide Squad. She's arresting anybody superpowered, hero or villain, and taking their powers, letting an Amazo robot use them. Well, the heroes have fled to Superman's Fortress of Solitude just to get a breather, and they're arguing who should lead them. Batman says Superman isn't in a good headspace to lead them because his son John has been kidnapped. Mr. Terrific says, hey, I lead the Justice Society of America right now. I should probably be the commander. And Batman's like, no, I've got the tactical know-how. And they're all arguing. And you know who steps up and takes the lead? Nightwing. It's actually a really believable and nice moment. It's really, really cool. Nightwing has evolved to a point where this is very, very plausible. This is the original Robin, but he's been a team leader on Teen Titans for decades and decades. And, in this world, the Justice League of America isn't operating right now. The heroes are there, but they don't operate as the Justice League. So the Titans are the biggest main superhero team. And anyway, he steps up and he takes leadership. And then the heroes take advantage of the fact that the Fortress of Solitude has, and this is just part of continuity, has tons of confiscated alien weapons and technology. And they get power suits. It looks like they're almost getting new toys, or this is their design for a Mortal Kombat game. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, actually. And, it's fun. Dan Mora comes up with some cool designs here. And after all that sort of, again, a good balance of some melodrama, some interpersonal stuff, and big action scene. We've got the Brainiac Queen. We've got possessed heroes that they have to fight with, I should say. It's fun. It's cool. This is a story that could be too dark, all these superheroes losing their powers and getting jailed and stuff. It could be too dark, but it doesn't lean too strongly that way. We do stay with a lot of fun, action, and adventure. But I think that and I give, first of all, Mark Waid a lot of credit. I give him a lot of credit for being able to hit that balance. But the reason I had the most fun in this, if I'm being honest, it's the artwork. It's dramatic and cool. Aquaman has like this little harpoon weapon on his forearm that he uses. Flash gets, a very fast cycle since he can't run fast. It's cool. That would be the only thing that, like, I reserve the right to be disappointed in this if Amanda Waller doesn't have her motivation spelled out a little better by the end of this. Because she has taken a turn. Amanda Waller has always been morally gray, and pretty dark at that for forever. But this is definitely, a big step into villainy territory. So Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, has been working for Amanda Waller for unknown reasons. So is Dreamer, the superhero Dreamer, but that's because Dreamer's family is being held hostage, essentially, as blackmail. But this seems to imply that Oliver may sort of just be doing like an undercover type thing, which makes sense. Like that would give him a big role and make him still a hero, because he's looking at like these weapons and stuff that have been confiscated by Amanda Waller and her team, and he seems very happy to pick one up. And I think that's the Time Commander's like tool that can manipulate time, I think. I don't know for a fact. He could still be working for her, but this seems to imply that he may be sort of doing his own plan to undermine Amanda Waller, which would make some sense. You lean towards that? The colorist gave a darker tone to the book. Some of it, I mean, let me see. We'll jump forward to the action scenes. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, all of this takes place in the Fortress of Solitude, but the early scenes where they're just talking, you're right, much more open, bright, and then as soon as there's a fight scene, everything is sort of dark. And you're right, that a bunch of that probably did come from the colorist making a choice. It's actually a good decision. Yeah, exactly. Let's just use the Black Mercy. Deep pull. Some good inking. Let's see who the inker is on this, because the art does look great. Just says artist Dan Mora. So I guess Dan did his own pencils and inks, or he did it digitally. So far, I think that this is fun. This is a good adventure. What else is worth talking about this week? I don't know that any of these are things that are like really worth diving into great detail about, unless people are super curious about one of these books that I picked up. I still mean to cancel Ultimate Black Panther. I don't think it's quite working for me, but I don't have a lot more of new stuff to say. I read some manga this week, though. Spy Family is back. New volume 12 came out of Spy Family. I liked it. I didn't love this volume. My favorite Spy Family stuff is a balance of all three main characters, Lloyd, Yor, and Anya, as a family. And this one mostly leans strongly towards Lloyd being on an undercover mission. He's a spy. That's why it's called Spy Family. So most of this is just Lloyd doing sort of a one-off mission that threatens the peace between the East and the West. It's good action. and stuff. It's just that when it's all three of them working undercover, there's that element of like any of them could mess up, and it's funnier when they're like keeping secrets from each other. If you haven't read it before, folks, Lloyd Forger is the spy known as Twilight, and he's sent undercover as a psychologist, and he has to make a family. So he adopts Anya, who happens to be telepathic. She like the East is doing all sorts of weird medical experiments, and she happens to be telepathic. Nobody else knows this. So she knows, though, that her father is a spy, but he thinks that she's just an ordinary girl. He ends up meeting and doing sort of a fake marriage with Yor, who works in the East as like a clerk for the government, but she's also secretly an assassin. So they're all holding secrets from each other, except Anya kind of knows what's going on, but she doesn't let them know. And it's very funny seeing them try to hide stuff from each other. It's very funny. And like I say, it's good. It's got some funny stuff early on with Anya at school. Anya is hilarious. She's always really, really funny. I like that. She's not a great student, and she wants to be cool, and she wants to do a cool mission and stuff like that. But oh, okay. Sorry. Beowulf is saying that I'm erasing Bond Man. Are you talking about their dog, Bond? Or are you talking about like the cartoon that Anya likes to watch? All I can say, though, the art is always good, effective. You know, this is a comedy and an action. It's just that this leans really strongly on just Lloyd for this volume. And I liked it. There were a couple really cool moments. For instance, there's a scene where Lloyd is undercover and he's on the run. He's disguised himself as Yor's brother, who works for the Eastern government, and they come across each other in the sewers at gunpoint to each other. And obviously, Lloyd is not going to kill his brother-in-law, even though he's got the drop on him. But it's a great tense scene because Yuri doesn't know that. It's funny. Yeah, Bond Man is the cartoon. Bond is the dog. So the dog that they adopt also has been experimented on, and he's like sort of a big, doofy, coward dog, but he can see the future. They do have a funny. They usually have like funny backup, like short little stories after the main book, and in this one, for instance, they have. I forget where it is. Oh, it's not a short story. It's in the main part. I forgot. Okay. Lloyd's handler, the one that sort of helps give him missions and stuff, she's adopted a dog recently, and they meet undercover at a kid's playground to get the mission, but they also are feeling a little competitive, so they have their dogs do a competition together. Yeah. The dog just gives up on a bunch of it. But he's always like hungry for food, so he actually found some like a hidden thing that the handler hid, and that was part of the contest. I don't know. I'm muttering. Sorry. I like the frisbee thing. Okay, they were gonna have a frisbee catching contest, and so Bond sees that, you know, just briefly in the future, the wind is going to have the frisbee come straight back. Okay, so. The two people throw their frisbees, and the German Shepherd runs off for it. Bond doesn't move at all because he knows that the frisbee's coming back. Everybody's surprised, but even then, Bond isn't very good at this, so he just gets bonked in the head with a frisbee. The wind? I know. That's one of the things that Tatsuya Endo does really well, is like really funny, exaggerated expressions. Anya mostly looks, sort of cute and stuff, but sometimes she gets like, I don't know, like an evil look because she's doing something she thinks is sneaky. And that's kind of funny. Or she gets like angry or surprised. I don't know. So it's very cartoony. You have to be into something that can go cartoony. But if you are into something that can be funny, Spy Family's really funny. No, I haven't seen the anime or the movies. My wife got me the first volume of this just thinking that I would like it, and she was right. I've been really into it. All right, see ya, Owen. I also read... I don't know where I put it. I just had it here. I read the latest Kaiju number 8. I guess I don't need it as a visual example. The latest one I didn't like a whole lot. It had some good action, but it didn't focus enough on the main character. It was like lots of little scenes of like the team fighting big kaijus, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. But I really want to see the main guy and see his struggles and stuff. So, one that I'm really loving right now, though, this is an old one that anybody can pick up, Initial D. I'm onto the second omnibus right now. There are 2 omnibuses out there so far. This was made in the early 90s, and it's about street racing. And I'm not the biggest car guy, actually. But this is so well paced. This is pretty much a master class in how to do storytelling and just have a really well-paced race, but also the build-up to the race. It's just incredible is all I want to say. I won't recap the whole plot or anything. It is about street racing and drifting and stuff like that, but they tell you everything you need to know. The characters are likable, have unique motivations from each other. It's great. It's really, really something. The art style might take some getting used to, but once you're used to it, it's very expressive. You can tell the characters apart. And it's cool seeing the growth of the main character from sort of like a guy with very light ambitions and stuff and no real interest in car racing to starting to appreciate the value of it once he realizes how good he is at it. And then like just coming up with small goals like, you know, he's 18 and he gets a goal if he wants to be able to buy his own car instead of borrowing his dad's. It's really nice seeing like this sort of coming of age. It's called Initial D. Initial D. It's really, really good. I've always heard good things about it. I just had never really gotten around to it. I think I've played some of the arcade games. I think I've heard some of the soundtracks for like the anime, but I've never read it, and I'm really loving it. I realize why it was so popular. Yeah, they could be, and this is just because this is like got guys like, you know, right on each other's tails with different driving styles, and it's like, how are they going to get past one another? You know, when one's trying to block the other out. It's really cool. Let's see. Was there something else I was going to talk about for comics that came out this week? I guess not. Oh, I remember. There's one more that I do want to read and react to, but I couldn't find it in any of my comic stores. I was hoping to get Cowl by Kyle Higgins and Rod Reese. I liked their original comic, which is basically about superheroes that form a union. So it's sort of like it deals with superheroes as an actual job, and not in a really goofy, funny way. Like more in like how could that actually work? It's an interesting series of questions that brings up, which makes us just think about how government and unions work and what the nature of heroism is. So I really like Cowl, but I couldn't find the new version yet. So that's very frustrating. I'm reading manga to help my Japanese learning. That's good. I do some of that too. Are there any superhero scabs? There's people that don't agree with the way that it should go. I don't think anyone formally walked like a picket line in the first story? That's an interesting question. Yeah, exactly. He's taking what seems at first like a simple premise and yeah, he builds on it in a really interesting way. I guess that's all I've got to talk about for comics, but I will mention that there are 2 animated comic book TV shows that are on streaming right now, and both seem really good so far from what I've seen, but I've only seen some. Batman Caped Crusader ended up on Amazon of all places, and I like that quite a bit. It's just a little bit more sort of dark than the 90s version, but a very similar art style, a little more retro, a little more pared down. I like it. And then there's also the Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Hold on, let me look at this. Thanks for bringing me joy during recent tough days and a big loss. I appreciate your transparency. When feeling down, is there a particular title or creator you gravitate to for a boost? Oh, that's a fun idea. I would say stuff that either has big action or big comedy. I'm if I'm in a depressive mood, I'm not necessarily ready to dig into something that maybe challenges me to think a little bit more. So sometimes it's just maybe a funnier manga like Spy Family, or a big action thing like Transformers by Daniel Warren Johnson. That's the kind of stuff I gravitate to when I'm like kind of down and I just need some escapism to a degree. Although I will say that both of those are examples of things that can warrant analysis on deeper levels, that there are just some things that I can enjoy a little bit more. Yeah, I saw that some people, I guess, were upset about that, and I'm sort of like, Penguin's been around for, like 70 years, and we've had him adapted into lots of animated and live action things, so is it that big a deal to do a gender swap just to give Batman some more female villains? I didn't think it was that big a deal, just because you can only tell the same story so many times, so let's just vary something up at a certain point, right? So I didn't mind that. Donald Duck by Carl Barks is actually a really good recommendation. Right, yeah, I heard about that Warner Brothers was just like, let's do some more of the 90s Batman. And he was like, we did that. Let's do something a little different. And yeah. Someone said if he's a woman, he won't be a physical threat to a guy like Batman. But seriously, Penguin was a threat. Exactly. Like, of the characters, like if you were going to turn Bane into a woman and like say that she was the same physical threat, maybe that isn't realistic. Maybe with Venom, you can get away with that. I don't know. But Penguin was always more just, an arms guy, a criminal guy, like a guy that had henchmen. And if you cornered him, he had trick umbrellas. He was basically just the guy that would come at you with a knife. He's never been the biggest physical threat. He just represents the criminal underworld. So, yeah, I've only seen 3 episodes, to be fair. Okay, so I've only seen through the Catwoman episode, and I really like their take on Catwoman, actually. And then I've only seen 2 of the Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Even though it's like hand-drawn instead of CG, they've got a very similar animated style. They've got the same voice cast for the Ninja Turtles themselves, which works very well. And the only thing I've got a question about is it seems like the premise is that this is all from the perspective of Leonardo making a comic book about them, so it might not actually be literally the adventures that they go through. I'm not clear on that yet. Oh, boy, see, I don't know everything about comics. I've never heard of Vengeance. Huh. Really? Yeah, that's a good point. Like, he was just a mobster, and yeah, whatever. No Jackie Chan, but they also don't. They're not like working too hard to sort of like keep him out of the picture. It's a story that like starts with the turtles have all been separated by a villain. So initially we get an episode about each of them and get to know each one as a character pretty well. That's a good point. Scarecrow could easily be a woman. Being male is not an important part of his character. His ethnicity and gender isn't. It's just that that's a brilliant psychiatrist that like messes around with chemicals and stuff. He's crazy himself. That's all that's important there. But anyway, I'm enjoying both Ninja Turtles and Batman Caped Crusader. So I plan on finishing both of those whenever I can fit it in. Let's see. Got a new trash movie bonanza coming to you guys soon. We've recorded and edited it. It's uploaded. Just sort of, I'm always fighting copyright claims with the companies there. I always win, but it takes time because if you get a copyright claim from somebody, and it's usually not even like a big studio, it's like somebody else. They get 30 days to respond to it, and I don't want to release the episode each time if we're not going to make any money off of it. So yeah. But we've got that. We're recording another one, and we're getting ready for a big 13th episode. We're doing a big deal for that. Let's see. Is there anything else to plug? Oh, I feel terrible that it's taken me this long to get the newest comic tropes up, but that would probably be up by, let's see, I work all day tomorrow. I bet I could have it done like Wednesday night, maybe make more sense to release Thursday morning. I think that's what I can get done. It'll be a fun one. And then my idea for the next episode that I'm like currently researching and gathering some pretty good quotes for. I think I want to talk about the Marvel method. That was Stan's way of saying like, I have a meeting with an artist and I say, what do you want to do this week? And they come up with something and I come up with something and then they draw the whole thing and then I come in and I script it and I give it the dialogue. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like you're doing a lot of the writing, to be honest. But yeah, we'll talk about that. Major pain and down Periscope. Ugh. We could do comedy though at some point. Comedy that just hasn't aged well or something, maybe. That could be a little more fun, maybe. Just speculating wildly, but it would be kind of fun to talk about something like Police Academy and just how dated its humor is now. Just like Mahoney, just casually hanging out and watching the women shower, and that's like not a big deal or anything. He's just like drinking a beer and like hanging out, and that's supposed to be funny. It could be funny, but it was just like really casual about how awful that actually is. Let's see. Remember that some of the artists like Kirby and possibly Ditko also provided dialogue suggestions. I know. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little, is how some of the artists felt about the so-called Marvel method, which I don't think Marvel really employs anymore and hasn't for a while. I don't think so. It was a way to do a lot of comics fast, but I think it was also a way to get an extra paycheck. Because like Stan could just be like, oh yeah, I wrote all of them. Give me a paycheck for each one. You're like, you did a little on each one. Had a good time chatting with all of you. And next week, I should ask for some recommendations of what people are reading, see if I'm missing anything. But I'm going to get going for now. Thank you again to Guy Dorian Sr., the guest for the first 30 to 40 minutes of this show. And I'm excited to see his and Larry Hama's upcoming book, Mounties versus Werewolves. I think that sounds like fun. And I'll talk to you guys next week about what kind of news and comics come out, but I'll be asking for some recommendations. That will be fun. Oh, did he really? Okay, well, I'll look into that a little bit more then. Like, thank you. That'll help inform my episode. Had a great time, though, everybody. Here's what I'll do to end the show. Wait, I want to do one special thing. Get me a moment here. I'm going to add something. quadruple, salute, loot. Take care, everybody. Keep reading comics.